So moving on, now to talk about the best practice and procurement. Francie Deegan from Cuadrilla Resources and Alistair Reisner from Sika. I hope I pronounced, Alistair, your name correctly there. You can tell me otherwise when you come up. Thank you. Alistair and Francis.
Thanks enough.
Is that all right?
So I go first. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by firstly thanking and congratulating the North West Energy Task Force and the Chambers of Commerce of Lancashire East and North and Western, and also Blackpool, Falden and Wyre Economic Development Corporation. I think they've organised an outstanding event today. I've certainly found it hugely beneficial, and I'm hoping and thinking that most of the people in the room, if not all, have found it likewise beneficial. I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking to you today about becoming a supplier to the shale gas sector. Now, I'm hoping that most of you in the room represent organisations that probably a minority already are suppliers, and all the rest of you all the rest of you want to become suppliers, with the exception of the 2 to 4% that I don't know if Bill worked out whether they were supposed to be at the ballroom dancing downstairs or not, and if they're still here, you can switch off right now, and there's no need to listen to the rest of what I'm saying. So you heard this morning from Lee Petts, I don't know if Lee's still in the room, who is a current supplier and has worked very closely and collaboratively with my company, Cuadrilla. And Lee told you that not only do we pay on time, but we also deliver coffee to your hospital bed should you injure yourself. I have to tell you, I didn't know that until this morning, and I shall probably contact Costa for a back fee on that, if that's what we're doing. So I can't promise you all that you're going to get coffee from us, but we will continue to pay on time. You will have heard from the Minister this morning, the Secretary of State for Energy, Michael Fallon, about why he thinks this sector is important. And I tell you, this sector will develop. It will develop. We need the gas. I won't go rehearse all the arguments that the Minister gave this morning, but we certainly need it, and we will use it. And the only question is, will we use our own gas or will we import the gas? There is no debate about whether the gas will be required. There is a growing awareness that it can be done, and it can be done properly in the UK, and that a lot of the scare stories that are propagated just are not relevant. Now, my company, Cuadrilla, will be submitting to Lancashire County Council probably within the next month planning applications to drill, hydraulically fracture and flow test the flow of gas from up to 8 exploration wells here in Lancashire. So as I stand here today, Lancashire remains at the forefront, and I would say is still the county at the front of shale gas exploration in the UK. But you're not alone. You've heard this morning again from the panel that large companies, Centrica working with us here in Lancashire, but also Total of France working in the Midlands and Yorkshire, and EDF and iGas and other companies are working in other parts of the UK. And there is shale gas right across Western Europe. So there is an opportunity for first mover advantage, but the starting pistol has fired, and that opportunity doesn't last forever. And certainly we hope that with your help, of the companies here in the audience, Lancashire is well positioned to be a leader in not just the UK, but in Europe. And if we look at the UK, it's uniquely positioned in Europe, because if you look at other European countries like France and Germany, they don't have the North Sea. I think people forget and sometimes minimize the enormous benefit and knowledge that resides in this country. It's still this country, Aberdeen, and I hope it'll remain this country. But it's not just all in Aberdeen. As you heard this morning, half of those employed in the oil and gas sector come from England, Wales, and Ireland, where obviously from my accent I come from. But let me move on and just move quickly through just a few points that I wanted to highlight. I'm not going to read out all the words here, but if you do want to become a supplier to this sector, you should know, and I think it's good news, this will be a long-term investment and a long-term relationship. Shale gas gets developed over 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 years. This is not a 1 or 2 year commitment. So if you want to enter the sector, then I would urge you to think long-term about it. Our specification is very specific. That might sound like a tautology, but we are a demanding customer. We demand that you deliver quality. We demand that you deliver on cost. And last, and most certainly not least, we demand that you deliver on time, every time. Because when we get into a production phase in shale gas, and I don't know if any of you have seen it in operation in the US, it moves from what we might call a traditional oil and gas operation to something much more akin to a manufacturing process. And it is all about doing the next well better than you did the last well, more cost effectively than you did the last well, more productive than you did the last well. And we need companies who can work in that environment. And we need people who can work in that environment. We need people who can work as part of a team. We need people who can deliver. And most of all, we need people that my colleague Leon has just said value health, safety, and the environment. And I mean that, value it, not ticking boxes. You will not survive in this sector if that is not a passion for you. Lastly, you need to be prepared to customize, collaborate, and integrate. You've heard from Leon, we don't do all this on our own. No oil and gas company, even BP and Shell, don't do it all on their own. The oil and gas industry has built up and survived over decades on the basis of companies collaborating with each other. Companies that compete in one part of the world will collaborate in other parts of the world. So it's not a mutually exclusive arrangement. But with our suppliers, particularly, as you'll see, we need you to collaborate with us, and in some cases integrate with us. In some cases you will, and Lee and Remsol are probably a good example of this, almost become part of our company. So some differences between the UK and the US supply chain. I would characterize this as saying it's not a difference of how we do things. I think most of what is done in the US will be done, not what we do, but how we do it. How we do it in the UK and the European Union will be different. And it'll be primarily different around some of these aspects, but principally around environmental monitoring, environmental services, water treatment and recycling. The focus on that in the EU and the UK is a lot higher, certainly than it was in the early days in the US. And I don't want to characterize the US as being currently like that, because I think they have evolved in a great way. But from day one in the UK, that is going to be more important. Site selection is very important, and how we do it, and that tends to be more complex also. And water treatment and recycling is a major business opportunity here. We do get water back out of the shale. You get water back from conventional oil and gas reservoirs. It's not a lot of difference, but it does need to be treated before it can be discharged into water courses or the sea. I'm going to skip right over this one. Just pick up some key messages again out of this one. In this industry, I'm sure like every other industry, the ones you're currently working in, relationship matters. We see maybe 10 or 12 companies some weeks, and the ones that we tend to form a relationship quicker are those who have done at least some research. So they come in and they talk to us and they know a little bit about shale. We're not expecting you to be world experts, but they have listened to Peter Stiles, who gave an excellent presentation this morning, or they have read something, and they display some knowledge of the area that they are interested in working in. We are particularly interested in environmentally sensitive technologies. The European Union requirements, as I mentioned, are much stricter in this regard as they are in the UK, and there's an opportunity to lead the way here. And we are being watched from Western Europe in particular. So our supplier framework, I'm going to skip through this fairly quickly. This is just illustrative, not intended to be, those boxes can move around a bit, but we do and will categorize suppliers by how they fit in terms of the fit with what we do and the value add. Not the value, but the value add. And that will range from commodity, what we used to call offshore as rope, soap, and dope, and it's not something you smoke, it's something you put on pipe threads, through to what we would call tier one, so drilling contractors or fracturing services, which could be integrated or even owned by the business, and then you'll get a differing range in between those two. There will be immediate local opportunities, probably at the lower end of that scale, for companies that haven't previously worked in the oil and gas industry. So you don't need to have decades of experience in the oil and gas industry to enter the sector. But as you move to the right and as you move up that y-axis, then we will expect that you will have some track record, either in the oil and gas sector or a similar sector. I see the box has already moved down, but when we say water and sand, we do mean we have a specification. So we don't pick the sand up off of Blackpool Beach and put it into a well. It has to be very well defined and meet certain criteria before it forms part of a fracturing service. It's a very critical component. Equally, cement. It's not just any old cement. We have companies like Schlumberger and Halliburton spending hundreds of millions of pounds researching cement every year, so that meets certain specifications for us. So it quickly gets quite specific, as I said earlier. I'll just skip through those. Getting towards the end here. If you haven't already gathered this, I'm sure you will, even if it's just today that you've been exposed to this. This is a watched sector. You will get a lot of attention. If you choose to participate in the shale gas sector, you will get a lot of attention. And not all of that attention is going to be pleasant. And you will never, believe me, get to a stage where everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet that shale gas is all wonderful and we all agree with you and we think you're fantastic. Because I've worked in the oil and gas business for 30 years and it hasn't happened there, and I don't think it's going to happen here. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're not at that stage in the nuclear industry. We're certainly not at that stage in the offshore wind industry or the onshore wind industry. We're probably not at that stage in any industry. Every industry has its critics. Shale gas tend to be a little bit louder, and so if you're going to get into it, you should exude a certain degree of confidence that you know why you're in it, and you're not ashamed of it. You're not skulking about it or afraid to tell your neighbours or your wife or your friends about it. You believe in it, and we want to work with people who believe in it. And if you don't believe in it, that's fine. We can go our separate ways. But you need to interact with the community, and we would certainly want to work with more Lancashire suppliers. You may be interested as an investor, and we've met some people today who are that. You will have NGOs, some who are prepared to engage with the industry, some who are not. And then as a supplier, you will deal with us, you will deal with all them, and you will invariably, certainly at this stage, also deal with the press, local and national. So you hopefully will either be comfortable with that already, or you will get comfortable with it as you work with us in developing this opportunity. So just to reiterate, I think what Leon has already covered largely, you can introduce yourself to us, and today is very much all about that, and it's been fantastic to meet so many companies, particularly companies based in Lancashire and the Northwest. We will be launching a supplier registration portal, so there will be further opportunities to register details, certainly with Cuadrilla and Centrica, our joint venture partner, and we will begin to categorise and hopefully be able to do business with more of you than we currently are. And you, please don't hesitate. We don't have all the answers. A good example, again, worked with, I'll name it again, Remsol. We rely on companies to not just work at that commodity end of the scale, but start moving up the value-add chain by bringing ideas and solutions to us. And that is my final slide. Just to think, I really do believe, I'm not just saying this, I believe Lancashire does have a unique opportunity here. Shale is not confined to Lancashire by any stretch of the imagination, but it is currently the place where, touch wood, if our planning applications get approved, be the location where we prove that not only is it in the ground, but it can come out of the ground. And we'd like to do that in collaboration with as many Lancashire and Northwest companies and take that across the UK and into Western Europe, where we already operate. We already operate in Holland and in Poland. And we look forward to, hopefully, quite a few of you joining us on that journey. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alistair Reisner, which Bill, I think, pretty much close enough on the surname there, and even if it were wrong, you'll certainly not be the first and probably not the last to be slightly off beam on the surname. I blame German heritage there. So I'm here today as a representative of only a small part of the supply chain that hopefully in the future will be supporting Francis and other companies that are operating in the shale gas arena. Briefly, I'd like to talk to you today about what we would like to see in terms of excellence for the procurement of activities to support these companies. The document today was talking about getting ready for shale. Well, a huge part of getting ready is making sure you're working with the right suppliers. And the only way to work with the right suppliers is to have the appropriate way to procure those services. So just a little bit of promo for who we are. We represent infrastructure contractors in the UK. Our members carry out about £25 billion worth of work across the UK each year, and that ranges from the very largest multinational contractors down to many of the small local contractors delivering at a regional level. Very pleased to see a number of members in the room today, including some who are actually already working on shale projects. Part of my role, I work in our national office down in London, so we take soundings from our members about what their concerns are. We can only work effectively as an organisation if we understand our members and what they care about. So every quarter we put something out, and just at the bottom right it says, what's worrying you at the moment? What are the big issues? Now, our organisation was set up in 1996, and ever since it started, the answer to that question, number one answer, has always been workload. It's always been, where's the next job going to come from? Not out of fear of where the next job comes from, but just that's what business is about, is making sure there's work coming through the door. Interestingly, just before I came out yesterday to come up here, I looked at, we've got the raw data from this survey that's been live for the last month. For the first time ever, it's actually skills and capacity that looks like it's going to be the number one issue. But I'm not going to go too much more detail into that because I think we've got people covering that next. However, number 2 or number 3 over that period, since '96, has always been issues around procurement. Because I think when procurement's done well, it starts the basis of a project, making sure that it goes in the right direction right from the start. However, all too often, the procurement's wrong at the start, and it's almost like pointing the ship at the iceberg even before it's left the harbour. So we've got a huge interest in making sure that we get the procurement right for the downstream benefits that will create. So when we got the offer a few weeks ago to come up and talk about what we saw as best practice in terms of procurement, I grabbed it with both hands, because this is an industry where if you can get things right across the industry as a whole, that's going to have huge benefits for everyone. So just finally, a little bit about our interest in shale gas. We've been fairly significant supporters of the shale gas sector for the last couple of years. In essence, a couple of years ago, we did have a discussion within our membership about some of the policies, some of the issues that we should be endorsing. And I think there were quite a few raised eyebrows when one of the things that we came out strongly in support of was development of the shale gas industry in the UK. Certainly speaking to some of my colleagues down in Westminster, Whitehall, there was a perception of, well, there's a bit kryptonite. It's an industry that you can get burned in. There's going to be problems there. If you're seen as a vocal and proponent of it, isn't that going to cause you a bit of a problem? And in many ways, the argument could be, well, we shouldn't be supporting it too much. Well, we've seen some very big numbers today, sort of £33 billion. Actually, over that same period, my industry will deliver probably about £500 billion worth. And actually, within the shale gas sector, the infrastructure contracting element of it will only be a relatively small part of that £33 billion. So we're not going to be huge beneficiaries in terms of money through the door for contractor members. However, it's about what it does for the economy. We believe that through delivery of shale, it secures our energy future, and that will have far wider spin-off benefits for our industry and for the economy as a whole. And also, quite importantly, while it won't be a huge part of the infrastructure contracting world, it will deliver huge benefits for what will probably be quite a small number of contractors who will work with companies like Cuadrilla, like iGas, and be able to develop their businesses over the coming years. So just... however, so that's why it's important to get the procurement system right to allow that engagement to happen. So what I'm saying to you now, I could be saying if I was speaking to an audience in the rail sector or speaking to an audience in roads, in water. These are just some common principles about what we believe makes good procurement, and more importantly, what we should be trying to avoid. So if I was to identify the single biggest issue that's reported back to us in terms of the problems associated with procurement, it's the duplication of effort. It's being asked to do things over and over again, either by different organisations or even within the same organisation when you're looking to tender some works, be that through pre-qualification questionnaires and then following up with further questions that are in essence the same. I was very heartened by what Leon earlier was talking about the HSE questionnaire, saying keeping it brief, not asking for too much information. I'm not saying don't ask all the information you need to ask. It's only asking what's relevant, though. I really swithered about the second one, inappropriate compliance requirements, because what it sounds like we're saying is you're overburdening us with compliance issues. I think if it's important that you ask about someone's ability to comply with something, it's absolutely essential that that is in there. What's inappropriate is if you're a fencing contractor, do you really need to know about the minutiae of the detail of some of the fracturing operations? So it's asking the right questions for the kind of supplier that you're trying to appoint. Crucially, I think that a huge part of the opportunity here will be, and we've heard about that this morning, that it will be for SMEs, but often the way that the procurement systems have been set up with other customers that we work with actually mitigates against SMEs working, whether it's requirements in terms of turnover or just the way that the market is approached. So we would like to see any approach that does come forward actually actively engage with SMEs as part of a community that could potentially bid for work. Time and money, at the end of the day, it's what all projects are about when you boil it down. But if you try and do either the procurement or the project with insufficient time, or the budget's not right, you will very quickly run into problems. Similarly, if you go out to the market just expecting it to respond, but actually you've not done the research about what capability is, then that's going to cause a problem. That's why today is great, because this is a demonstration of the developer side of the industry actually wanting to understand what you as suppliers, what your capability is, and starting to have that conversation. Inappropriate risk transfer. Clearly, there will be some risk transfer through when you're procuring opportunities, but it's about which risk best sits with which parties, and not trying to push risk somewhere else just to try and get it off your table. And finally, and I don't envisage this being a problem, particularly given what we've heard today, an inability in terms of actually procuring. Huge problems arise where people just don't know how to go and buy the things that they're looking for. So, to close things out, if we were looking for a model that we would like to see in terms of engaging for suppliers to work in shale, as I said, first thing today is a great example of engaging with the market. That's crucial. Getting out there, speaking to people, understanding what's going on in the market, understanding what the constraints are, understanding where there might need to be work to develop the market to meet demand. Second part is local communities. While I'm here talking about shale gas, we're working at the moment on things like HS2. You've got to bring the local communities with you, and if part of that is using your procurement process to bring the communities on board to help them play a part in the delivery of projects, that's vitally important. But also, when you're procuring, you should be making sure that the suppliers that you're working with have that same mindset as you, recognising the importance of that community, of those communities. Incentivisation, if things work better if people have aligned incentives. If one person's gaining hugely and actually there's no benefit in the other parts of the team to support them where problems arise, that can create friction. I mentioned earlier timetable. If procurement is costing money for the suppliers, try and Constantine shorten the process to save there. It is about appointing the right supplier, not the cheapest one. Forms of contract, I am very aware that there are members of the legal community, and they'll be a hugely represented in the room, and they'll be a hugely important part of the supply chain, but I'd like them to be for the best of reasons rather than because there's been conflict that goes on the projects. That's not how this should work. And finally, it should be about developing the supply chain, so it's not just appointed for one job, but hopefully developing the companies that are appointed so they work project to project. So, and that is me.